Okay, let me put it this way. Those accountants with which I discussed this topic, and I talked to them very practically, so we have some idea that we want to be completely legal. And all accountants refuse to offer some kind of reasonable solutions, because I think that there is a topic. It's not a global problem. It's not something which requires building big new structures or some kind of extra regulations. No, it's just who and how does it. My question is to community. It doesn't mean that the problem is not possible to solve. Maybe you solved it already, but not the way I talk to. Maybe you have some other ways to solve the problem. Where there is a situation which is quite clear when the space of the IPv4 addresses is shrinking, so the market is collapsing, and we don't have enough IP addresses, and so we don't have enough registers of these IP addresses. So there is a situation when Lear sells addresses for the big money. So the RIPE has a procedure, standard procedure, simple procedure for transferring these addresses, which says that one layer gives address to the other, and it can be paid. So this is normal in this procedure. It looks like it's okay. So the number of transfers is growing. But here comes, in the Russian legislation, we are in a funny situation. As we understand, IP addresses do not belong to Lear. It's not asset of Lear. We don't have any license or any right to use for this IP address. No paper, nothing. And the changing of or the allocation gets a new gets a new record, and it's not fixed in any official documents, but there is a official legislation in our accounting legislation that in any business transaction should be reflected in a certain kind of documents and records and some kind of formal contract. In this case, there is no such thing. Well, actually, it is. And one company gives to other companies some paper, and the job is done. From the viewpoint of taxation, if you, for example, don't pay enough taxes, this is your task to prove that you paid everything correctly. It's not the task of the tax service to do it. In our civil code, it's just you are guilty by default if you don't do certain procedures. And there is a clash of two ideas when we perform some operations without paperwork, but the law demands some kind of a document or contract. So what are the options? According to the procedure, you can give these addresses free. And here you see this the gray scheme. So as we call them, for example, you sign a contract like consulting, and sometimes in more sophisticated way, they just ask for more sophisticated contract or something. But unfortunately, these gray schemes have some kind of risks, which any lawyer or accountant will see immediately. From the taxation viewpoint, the companies can use different accounting systems. So it just happens that the money is sent to a company which pays less taxes. For the taxation office, it's For in this case, it looks like a tax evasion, and sometimes it looks like a forged or fake document between two faked companies. So the tax inspection loves these cases very much. And I don't want to say that it causes the additional reason to check and to look closer at this company. So these are certain risks. And you see that you have two papers. You have contract and you have, and there is an agreement which is given to writer. They can be synchronized physically and logically, and there also can be a problem with giving, sending money. And if the contract isn't fulfilled, so how can you argue this? So it cannot be done because these are two different documents which are not connected with each other. And so in this case, you have risks to simply to come across crooks and come across a fraud scheme. So on the next slide. And this is the last slide. So the question is, if some of you have already existing solutions, and if you don't, so do you have any ideas how it can be done with the minimum cost? Because it's a very insignificant issue, but so I don't want to build a very sophisticated, complicated mechanism around it. So Anton is asking to ask, who counts, who has the record of the IP addresses? So what do you mean, accounting or what? Does anybody have the IP addresses registered in the assets, in the accounting papers? So the chairman wants to say something. Well, no, I'm just participant. I'm part of this market. I'm not the chairman in this kind of conversation. As for the second position on this slide, there are mechanisms for this kind of contracts through the bank. You go through the bank, and there are brokers who take some risks from the second one. So it was, and I'm not broker. I never used it, and I never planned doing these things. Yeah, it's clear that there are mechanisms, but external mechanisms. And as for the first part of the slide, so accountants are more scared by the tax inspection rather than by the crooks. Well, I understand. Yeah, you can try to solve the problem like that. Yes, you just have to pay more. Well, the situation is actually worse if the buyer and seller are in different countries. From the taxation viewpoint, it's just very strange. It's just illegal money transfer. So it's quite complicated issue. And so the question is, what kind of documents should be used to legalize it? Well, you said some kind of agreements. So company A is in Cyprus, and it gives to company B a paper that you got your money, thank you very much. And this is your payment for some kind of work. And this is like a red cloth for the tax inspection. So it's just written there. You cannot use the document in accounting which you try to cover which you have to cover the falsified or an intangible something. So it's just now you're talking about nothing, but at the same time you moved out real money outside the country. So the company has only one way to deal with it: go to the arbitration court. I'm from the Open Network Association. Well, the IP addresses, it's a right of the user, and they are not considered as assets. As for the transferring IP addresses, this is just changing the right of the user. And how do you do it? Who does it? It does by the agents. Okay, there is a Cyprus company, and the Cyprus store is just providing some kind of services. As Alexey said, we're talking about services, not just works, because there is no product which you can touch and which can be tangible. And we were talking about immaterial service or immaterial something. And if you have two agents, so you have to pay VAT so far as the business operation was conducted on the territory of Russian Federation, apart from the case when one of the agents, the one which gives and gets money, is not user or not covered by some special taxation. Well, it could be could be invited to a tax inspection, but it's nothing else. But if the recipient is outside of Russian Federation, you don't have to pay the VAT because the service was provided outside Russia. But as for the legality of it and jurisdiction, well, there can be questions. And if the tax inspection proves that the service was provided on the Russian Federation, you have to pay the VAT. Well, I never heard about it. Frankly speaking, I believe that actually they will try to, tax inspection will try to prove that it was an illegal transaction rather than we try to find out under whose jurisdiction it was done. Well, it doesn't have business purpose, it doesn't have profit. Yes, it's just a money transfer outside of Russia. Well, you're getting some kind of intangible asset. Well, yes, but this intangible asset exists from the viewpoint of the participants of the business. Well, but some people say that this is asset because it costs money. I think that at any court, when you explain this deal, you will get new IP address, you can register new users from which you collect money. So there is the business logic in this operation. Well, I can't say that business assets are, business IP address are assets. Well, it's an intangible asset. Yeah, I agree. But if it comes to the arbitration court, so it will really happen like that. But I don't know. But not one lawyer will agree to go to court and take this case. It's something which people just don't like to do in the court. I don't know about other jurisdictions. Here in Russia, any deal can be argued. Yeah, you're right. That's I just want to make it clear. So, and if this right to use is independent from the participants, it's if you have this paper, which is called right to use. We have 10 minutes, but I think that everybody who participates in this discussion. So my company has been dealing with these issues, and I would like to share my experience, which is about that we have the contract for the services for the company, and these contracts are so perfectly written and scrutinized by the lawyers from different companies, from the state-owned companies, educational company. Can you share with us with the sample or template of this contract? Well, I can tell you there is nothing in the secret there. we're just providing a service. But in this contract, we stipulate that the company which is the proprietor, they must sign some special documents, transfer documents, and so it works. It's legal, and we have positive experience. Yes, I agree with you about the VAT payments. I agree with the previous presenter, and the experience of the deals or the contracts when the seller and buyer and seller are in different countries. We have this experience, and the VAT in this case is not. You don't have to pay it. And in the agreements, in the transfer agreements which we have, there is a special stipulation, this document about the stages of payments. It's a prior document, and how it is, how it corresponds with your agreement.
In the agreement, we stipulate that the end user must get his service in the long run. Then we sign the contract. If anything goes wrong, then each side stays with what it has. Can you give us the list? Maybe you can send us something, yes, into the mailing list. Can you send it just to the mailing list to open the meeting of our working group with this publication? I understand that your clients have not passed the chamber checks. We have organizations that pass so many checks. They have to get the approval of agreements, and they just try to make everything perfect. And I am interested in the position of tax authorities. In this case, we didn't have any questions so far. Then, can we see the materials you can share in the site of the legal group? I think that we have a very good result of our above. But there is... Can I tell briefly? The things we buy and sell is not formed in any way because people replace it by services, and these are different articles of the civil code. How can it be connected legally? Currently, it is formed in the following way, that we provide the service of changing the database, this kind of service. This is the question, how to do it in the way so that it does not contradict the legislation. How can you do this ideally just by one document? This is the question I am asking the audience. I would like just to add something. There is such practice for a long time. For example, they have one of the providers has an agreement, and maybe you should Rosny, for example, they use this kind of agreement. Maybe we should ask them to help us to be an arbiter. Unfortunately, we cannot hear this. We can only ask Rosny whether they would like to help us. We cannot tell them, just do this. I will answer your question. After the receiving party get everything, is satisfied, it signs the act which closes this deed, and it doesn't have any pretenses. It has got everything. For example, if these are some kind of resources, they can see those resources in their web portal, and they're happy. You know, colleagues, now we're out of time already. That's why we have the following situation. There are certain results, preliminary results. There is a working group where those results will be published, and the colleague who distracted, Can I ask you also to sign for this working group and to continue in the to take part in the continuation of the discussion? In fact, I said there are certain results. If there are some things, would you like to share this with the community? Now we can see two options, Rosneft, and the second option is to work with those results which our colleagues have. Maybe we can combine them. I propose to continue in the mailing list. I think that the result is more than satisfactory for the both. Nobody prohibits us to gather together and to continue the discussion. Now we are going to restaurant Pashmir and we are going to discuss it. It's in Hazit Akhtar Street 30. Just raise your hands who remember the street. It is near Lake Kazan. You have the address in your materials. Welcome to the restaurant. That's all.